Hello guys, welcome back. This story recounts the discovery of a missing aviator's terrifying account. The notion that the remarkable account known as the Joyce Armstrong record is a complex hoax created by some person with a twisted sense of humor has been dismissed by everyone who has studied it. The most grotesque and inventive storyteller would pause before connecting his dark imaginings with the undeniable and terrible facts which support the narrative. Although the claims within it are astonishing and even grotesque, it is nevertheless becoming clear to reasonable minds that they are accurate, and we must adapt our understanding to this new reality. Our world seems to be protected by a very slim and fragile margin from a most strange and unforeseen peril. I will attempt in this account, which presents the original document in its somewhat incomplete state, to provide the reader with all the known facts, beginning by stating that if some doubt the story of Joyce Armstrong, there is absolutely no question regarding the circumstances of Lieutenant Myrtle and Mr. Hayconer, who certainly died in the way reported. The Joyce Armstrong record was discovered in a field named Lower Haycock, situated a mile west of the village of Withyham, on the border of Kent and Sussex. It was on the 15th of September that a farm worker, James Flynn, employed by Matthew Dodd of Chauntry Farm, noticed a briar pipe near a footpath beside the hedge in Lower Haycock. A short distance farther along, he found a pair of shattered binoculars. Finally, among some nettles in a ditch, he saw a flat, canvas-covered book, which turned out to be a notepad with removable pages, some of which had come loose and were blowing along the bottom of the hedge. These he gathered, but some pages, including the first, were never found, creating a lamentable gap in this vital statement. The laborer took the notebook to his employer, who then showed it to Dr.J.H. Atherton of Hartfield. This gentleman immediately saw the necessity for expert analysis, and the papers were sent to the Aero Club in London, where they remain. The initial two pages of the manuscript are lost. One is also torn away at the conclusion of the narrative. Though these omissions do not damage the overall flow of the story, it is thought the missing beginning dealt with Mr. Joyce Armstrong's credentials as a flyer, which can be confirmed from other sources and are acknowledged to be unmatched among England's pilots. For a long time, he has been considered one of the boldest and most intellectual of flying men, a blend which let him both design and trial several new inventions, including the common gyroscopic device that bears his name. The main part of the manuscript is neatly written in ink, but the final lines are in pencil, and are so uneven as to be almost unreadable exactly in fact, as they might look if written hastily from the cockpit of a moving aircraft. There are also several stains on the last page and on the cover, which authorities have identified as blood likely human and certainly from a mammal. The discovery of something very like the malaria organism in this blood, and the knowledge that Joyce Armstrong suffered from recurrent fever, is a striking example of the new tools modern science provides for investigators. Now a word about the character of the author of this groundbreaking statement. Joyce Armstrong, according to the few friends who truly knew him, was a poet and a visionary, as well as an engineer and an innovator. He was a man of substantial means, much of which he used in following his aerial passion. He kept for private aeroplanes in his hangars near Devizes, and is reported to have made as many as 170 flights last year. He was a solitary man prone to dark moods, during which he would shun company. Captain Dangerfield, who knew him best, states there were times when his oddness seemed to verge on something more serious. His practice of taking a shotgun with him in his aeroplane was one sign of this. Another was the unhealthy impact that the death of Lieutenant Myrtle had on his mind. Myrtle, who was trying for the altitude record, fell from a height of more than 30,000 feet. Horrifying to tell, his head was completely destroyed, though his body and limbs kept their shape. At every meeting of aviators, Joyce Armstrong, according to Dangerfield, would ask, with a puzzling smile, "And where, please, is Myrtle's head?" On another occasion after dinner, at the mess of the flying school on Salisbury Plain, He began a discussion about what would be the most lasting threat aviators would face. After hearing various views on air pockets, structural flaws, and overbanking, he finished by shrugging and refusing to give his own opinion, though he gave the impression it differed from those of his companions. It is noteworthy that after his own total disappearance it was discovered, his personal affairs were settled with a precision that may indicate he had a strong feeling of impending doom. With these necessary clarifications, I will now present the narrative exactly as it is, starting at page 3 of the blood-stained notebook. Nevertheless, when I dined at Rheims with Coselli and Gustav Raymond I found neither was conscious of any special peril in the higher atmosphere. I did not actually voice my thoughts, but I came so close that had they shared the idea they would have voiced it. But they are too shallow, boastful men with no interest beyond seeing their foolish names in print. It is notable that neither had ever gone much beyond the 20,000-foot mark. Naturally, people have been higher in both balloons and on mountain climbs. It must be well above that level that the aeroplane meets the danger zone, always assuming my forebodings are correct. Aeroplaning has existed for more than 2 decades, and one might well wonder why this threat is only appearing now. The answer is clear. In the early days of low-powered engines, when 100 horsepower was deemed sufficient, flights were very limited. Now that 300 horsepower is common, trips to the upper air have become simpler and more frequent. Some recall how, in younger days, Garros gained worldwide fame by reaching 19,000 feet, and flying over the Alps was seen as a great feat. Our standards are now much higher, and there are 20 high flights for every one in earlier years. Many have been made safely. The 30,000-foot level has been reached repeatedly with no ill effect beyond cold and breathlessness. What does this show? A visitor might land on this planet many times and never see a tiger. Yet tigers exist, and if he came down in a jungle, he might be eaten. There are jungles in the upper sky, and there are worse things than tigers living there. I believe in time they will chart these jungles precisely. Even now I could name 2. One lies over the Pau Biarritz area of France. I suspect a third is in the Hamburg-Wiesbaden region. Another is directly above me as I write here in my house in Wiltshire. It was the vanishing of the airmen that first made me ponder. Of course, everyone claimed they had crashed into the sea, but that never satisfied me. First, there was Verrier in France. His machine was located near Bayonne, but his body was never recovered. There was also the case of Baxter, who disappeared, though his engine and some metal parts were found in a Leicestershire wood. Their doctor, Middleton of Amesbury, who was watching the flight with a telescope, states that just before clouds blocked the view, he saw the machine at a vast height suddenly shoot straight up in a series of jerks in a way he thought impossible. That was the last sighting of Baxter. There was correspondence in the papers, but it led nowhere. There were several other similar incidents, and then there was Hay Connor's death. What a fuss there was about an unsolved mystery of the air, and how many newspaper columns. Yet how little was ever done to solve it. He came down in a tremendous glide from an unknown height. He never left his machine and died in the pilot's seat. Died of what? Heart disease, said the doctors. What did Venables say? Hay Connor's heart was as strong as mine. Nonsense. Venables was the only person with him when he died. He said he was shaking and looked badly frightened. He only said one word to Venables, which sounded like monstrous. Died of fright, said Venables, but could not guess what scared him. They could make no sense of that at the inquest, but I could. Monsters. That was the final word of poor Harry Hay Connor, and he did die of fright, just as Venables thought. And then there was Myrtle's head. Does anyone truly believe a man's head could be forced entirely into his body by the impact of a fall? Well, perhaps it is possible, but I have never believed it was so with Myrtle. And the grease on his clothes, all slimy with grease, said someone at the inquest. Strange nobody thought further. I did, but then. I have been thinking for a good while. I have made 3 flights. Hal Dangerfield teased me about my shotgun, but I was never high enough. Now, with this new light machine and its engine, I should easily reach 30,000 tomorrow. Of course. It is dangerous. I will try for the record. Maybe I shall try for something else too. If a man wants to avoid peril, he should keep away from flying and settle for slippers and a dressing gown. But I will visit the air jungle tomorrow, and if anything is there I shall know. If I return, I'll be something of a celebrity. If I do not, this notebook may explain my goal and how I die pursuing it. But no nonsense about accidents or mysteries, please. I selected my monoplane for the task. There is nothing like a monoplane for real work. Beaumont learned that early on. For one thing, it isn't bothered by damp, and the weather looks as if we will be in clouds the whole time. The engine is a 10-cylinder rotary working up to 175. It is a fine little model and responds like a sensitive horse. It has every modern feature: enclosed body, high curved skids, brakes, gyroscopic stabilizers, and 3 speeds, operated by changing the angle of the wings. I took a shotgun and a dozen cartridges loaded with buckshot. You should have seen the face of Perkins, my old mechanic, when I told him to load them. I was dressed like an Arctic explorer, with 2 sweaters under my suit, thick socks inside my lined boots, a storm cap of flaps, and my goggles. It was sweltering outside the hangars, but I was heading for the top of the Himalayas and dressed accordingly. Perkins knew something was happening and begged to come. But a monoplane is a one-man affair if you want every bit of performance. I might have if I were using the biplane, but a monoplane is a one-man affair if you want every bit of performance. Naturally, I took an oxygen bag. Anyone attempting the altitude record without one would be frozen or suffocated. I examined the wings, the rudder, and the control lever before boarding. Everything seemed in order. Then I started the engine and found it ran smoothly. I circled my home field once or twice to warm her up. When released, she rose almost immediately on the lowest speed, and then with a wave to Perkins and the others, I leveled the wings and set her to the highest speed. She skimmed like a swallow downwind for 8 or 10 miles until I pointed her nose up slightly, and she began to climb in a wide spiral toward the clouds above. It was a close, warm day for an English September, with the quiet and weight of coming rain. It is vital to ascend slowly and adjust to the pressure. Now and then came sudden gusts from the southwest, one so strong and sudden it caught me off guard and turned me halfway around for a moment. I recall when gusts and whirls and air pockets were serious hazards, before we learned to put overwhelming power into our engines. Just as I reached the cloud layer, with the altimeter showing 3,000, the rain fell. My word, how it poured. It drummed on my wings and beat against my face, fogging my glasses so I could barely see. Higher up it turned to hail, and I had to turn away from it. I reduced speed, for it was hard to travel against it. One of my cylinders was misfiring a foul plug, I expect, but still I rose steadily with plenty of power. Soon the trouble passed, and I heard the full, deep purr. That is where the beauty of modern silencers shows. We can finally control our engines by sound, how they squeal and sob when in trouble. All those pleas were wasted formerly, when every sound was drowned by the tremendous noise of the machine. If only the early pilots could return to see the beauty and perfection bought at the cost of their lives. About 9:30 I was nearing the clouds. Below me, blurred and shadowed by rain, lay the wide expanse of Salisbury Plain. Several flying machines were doing routine work at the 1,000-foot level, like little black swallows against the green. I expect they wondered what I was doing up in the clouds. Suddenly a gray curtain drew below me and damp folds of mist swirled around my face. It was damply cold and bleak, but I was above the hailstorm, which was something. The cloud was as dark and dense as a London fog. In my eagerness to break clear, I raised the nose until the warning bell rang, and I actually began to slide backward. My soaked wings had made me heavier than I realized, but soon I was in lighter cloud, and quickly cleared the first layer. There was a second layer, opal-colored and fluffy, far above my head, a white, unbroken ceiling above, and a dark, unbroken floor below, with the monoplane struggling upward on a great spiral between. It is terribly lonely in these cloud spaces. Once a large flock of small water birds passed me, flying swiftly west. The quick beat of their wings and their musical call were cheerful too. Here, I think they were teal. But I am a poor naturalist. Now that we humans have become birds, we must learn to know our kin by sight. The wind below whirled and shifted the broad cloud plain. Once a great swirl formed in it, a whirlpool of vapor, and through it, as down a funnel, I glimpsed the distant world. A large white biplane was passing far beneath me. I believe it was the morning mail between Bristol and London. Then the drift closed again and the great solitude was unbroken. Just after 10 I reached the lower edge of the upper cloud layer. It was made of fine, thin vapor drifting swiftly from the west. Already it was very cold. Though my altimeter only showed 9,000, the wind had been rising steadily and was now a sharp breeze. The engines worked perfectly, and we droned steadily upward. The cloud bank was thicker than I expected, but at last it thinned to a golden mist, and then instantly I shot out, and there was a clear sky and a bright sun above, all blue and gold above, all shining silver below. One vast, glimmering plain as far as I could see. It was 10:15, and the barograph needle indicated 12,800. Up I went, my ears tuned to the deep purr of my motor, my eyes busy with the clock, the revolution counter, the fuel lever, and the oil pump. No wonder flyers are called fearless. With so much to watch, there is no time to worry. About then I noted how unreliable the compass is above a certain height. At 15,000 feet mine pointed east and a point south. The sun and wind gave me my true direction. I had hoped to find perfect calm at these heights, but with every 1,000 feet the gale strengthened. My machine groaned and shook in every part as it met the wind, and swept away like paper when I banked into a turn, skimming downwind faster than any person has likely moved. Yet I always had to turn and beat back into the wind, for I sought more than a height record. By my calculations, my air jungle lay above Wiltshire, and all my effort would be wasted if I hid the outer layers elsewhere. When I reached the 19,000-foot level, around midday, the wind was so strong I looked anxiously at my wing supports, expecting them to snap. I even released the parachute behind me and hooked it to my belt, ready for disaster. Now was when poor workmanship costs a pilot his life, but she held bravely. Every wire and strut hummed and vibrated, but it was glorious to see how, despite the beating, she still mastered nature and ruled the sky. There is surely something godlike in man that he can rise above the limits creation seemed to set and rise by such unselfish, heroic dedication as this conquest of the air shows. Talk of human decline. When has such a story been written? These thoughts filled my mind as I climbed that huge slope, with the wind sometimes beating my face and sometimes whistling past my ears, while the cloudland below fell away until the folds of silver merged into one flat, shining plain. But suddenly I had a dreadful new experience. I have known what our neighbors call a whirlwind, but never on this scale. Without warning, I was snatched into the heart of one. That huge river of wind had whirlpools within. It is monstrous as itself. I spun with such speed I nearly lost consciousness, then fell suddenly, left wing first, down the vacuum funnel at the center. Only my belt kept me in my seat, and the shock left me half senseless over the side. I dropped like a stone, losing nearly 1,000 feet, but I can always make a supreme effort. My one great merit as a flyer. I realized the fall was slowing. The whirlpool was a cone, and I had reached its tip. With a terrible wrench, throwing my weight to one side, I leveled the wings and turned away from the wind. Then, shaken but successful, I pointed the nose up and began again my steady climb. Instantly I shot out of the eddies and skimmed down the sky. Just after 1 o'clock, I was 21,000 feet above the sea. I took a wide arc to avoid the whirlpool, and soon was safely above it. However, it was very cold, and I felt the nausea that comes with thin air. To my great relief, I had risen above the gale, and with each 100 feet, the air grew calmer. For the first time, I opened my oxygen bag and took occasional breaths of the wonderful gas. I shouted and sang as I soared into the cold, still outer world. I felt it flow like a tonic through my veins, and I was excited almost to drunkenness. It is clear to me that the unconsciousness that struck Glacier, and to a lesser degree Coxwell, when in 1862 they went up in a balloon to 30,000 feet, was due to the extreme speed of a vertical ascent. By climbing gently and accustoming oneself slowly to the reduced pressure, there are no such dreadful effects. At that same great height, I found I could breathe without undue distress, even without oxygen. It was bitterly cold, however, and my thermometer read 0. At 1:30, I was nearly 7 miles above the earth and still climbing steadily. I found, however, the thin air gave noticeably less lift to my wings, and I had to lower my angle of climb. It was already clear that even with my light weight and strong engine, there was a limit ahead. Worse, one sparking plug troubled again, and the engine was fired intermittently. My heart was heavy with fear of failure. It was about then. I had a most strange experience. Something zoomed past in a smoke trail and exploded with a loud hiss, sending out a cloud of steam. For a moment I could not imagine what happened. Then I recalled the Earth is constantly bombarded by meteors and would be nearly uninhabitable if they were not mostly vaporized in the outer atmosphere. I have no doubt the risk would be very real at the edge of the Earth's envelope. Here is a new danger for the high-altitude man, for 2 more passed me as I neared the 40,000-foot mark. My barograph showed 41,300 when I realized I could go no higher. Physically, the strain was not yet too great, but my machine had reached its limit. The thin air gave no firm support, and the slightest tilt became a side slip, while she felt sluggish on the controls. Perhaps with a perfect engine, another 1,000 feet might have been possible, but it still misfired, and the cylinders seemed dead. If I had not already reached the zone I sought, I would never see it on this journey. But was it possible I had attained it? Soaring in circles like a huge hawk at the 40,000-foot level, I let the monoplane guide itself, and with my glass I carefully observed my surroundings. The sky was perfectly clear. There was no sign of the dangers I had imagined. I said I was soaring in circles. It struck me I should take a wider sweep and explore a new air tract. If a hunter entered a jungle, he would drive through to find his game. My reasoning suggested the air jungle lay over Wiltshire. This would be to the south and west. I took my bearings from the sun, for the compass was useless and no trace of Earth was visible, only the distant silver cloud plain. However, I got my direction as best I could and kept straight on. I estimated my fuel would last another hour or so, but I could use it to the last drop, since a single grand glide could always take me down. Suddenly I noticed something new. The air ahead lost its crystal clarity. It was full of long, ragged strands like very fine cigarette smoke. It hung in wreaths and coils, turning slowly in the sunlight. As the monoplane shot through, I tasted a faint oiliness on my lips, and a greasy film coated the machine. No, it was not life. But might it be the remains of life? Some extremely fine organic matter seemed suspended. There was no life there. It was formless and spread over many acres before fading into emptiness. Above all, might it be the food for life, for monstrous life, just as humble ocean grease feeds the mighty whale? Can I hope to describe it as I saw it last Thursday? This thought was in my mind when I looked up and saw the most wonderful sight ever seen. Imagine a jellyfish like those in summer seas, bell-shaped and enormous, larger, I think, than the dome of St. Paul's. It was light pink veined with delicate green, but the whole structure so thin it was a faint outline against the blue sky. It pulsed with a gentle, regular rhythm. From it hung to long, drooping green tentacles, swaying slowly. This gorgeous vision passed quietly over my head, as light and fragile as a soap bubble, and drifted on its stately way. I had partly turned to watch this beautiful creature when, instantly, I found myself amid a whole fleet of them, of all sizes but none as large as the first. Some were small, but most about balloon-sized. They had a delicacy of texture and color like finest Venetian glass. Pale pink and green were the main hues, but all had a lovely shimmer where sunlight touched them. Hundreds drifted past, a wonderful fairy squadron of unknown sky-ship creatures so attuned to these pure heights. One could not imagine anything so delicate near Earth. But soon my attention was caught by a new phenomenon: the serpents of the outer air. These were long, thin, fantastic coils of vapor-like stuff, which twisted at great speed, flying round so fast the eye could hardly follow. Some were 20 or 30 feet long, but their outline was so hazy they seemed to fade into the air. These air snakes were light gray, with darker lines inside suggesting an organism. One whisked by my face, and I felt a cold, clammy touch. But they were so unsubstantial I did not think them physically dangerous, any more than the beautiful bell creatures. They had no more solidity than sea foam. But a more terrible experience awaited. Floating down from a great height came a purplish patch of vapor, small at first, but rapidly growing until it seemed hundreds of feet across. Though made of some transparent, jelly-like substance, it had more definite shape and solidity than anything before. There were more signs of physical structure, especially to vast, shadowy circular plates on either side, which may have been eyes, and a solid white projection between them as curved and cruel as a vulture's beak. The whole look of this monster was threatening, and it kept changing color from light mauve to a dark, angry purple so dense it cast a shadow when it drifted between me and the sun. On the upper curve of its huge body were 3 large projections like enormous bubbles, and I was sure they held some very light gas to buoy the misshapen mass in the thin air. The creature moved swiftly, keeping pace easily, and for 20 miles or more it escorted me, hovering like a bird of prey waiting to strike. Its method of moving so fast it was hard to follow was to throw out a long, sticky streamer ahead, which seemed to pull the rest of the writhing body forward. So elastic and gelatinous was it that its shape changed constantly, each change more threatening and revolting. I knew it meant harm. Every purple flush told me so. The vague, staring eyes turned always on me were cold and merciless. I dipped the nose to escape, as I did. Quick as a flash, a long tentacle shot from the floating blubber, and fell light and sinuous as a whip across the front of my machine. There was a loud hiss as it lay a moment on the hot engine. Then it whisked back, while the huge flat body contracted as if in pain. I dove steeply, but another tentacle fell and was sheared off by the propeller. A long, gliding, sticky, snake-like coil came from behind and caught me round the waist, pulling me from the cockpit. I tore at it, my fingers sinking into the glue-like surface, and for a moment broke free, only to be caught round the boot by another coil, which jerked me nearly onto my back. As I fell over, I fired both barrels, though it was like attacking an elephant with a pea shooter. To think any weapon could cripple the bolt. Yet I aimed better than I knew, for with a loud report, one of the great blisters on the creature's back burst from the buckshot. Clearly my guess was right, and these vast clear bladders were filled with lifting gas, for instantly the huge body turned sideways, writhing to find balance, while the white beak snapped in fury. But I had already shot away on the steepest dive I dared, engine full on, the propeller and gravity shooting me down like a meteor. Far behind I saw a dull purple smudge shrinking into the blue sky. I was safe from the deadly jungle of the outer air. Once safe I throttled back, for nothing strains a machine more than full power from height. It was a glorious spiral glide from nearly 8 miles up, first to the silver cloud layer, then to the storm cloud below, and finally, in driving rain, to the ground. I saw the Bristol Channel as I broke from the clouds, but having some fuel left I went 20 miles inland before landing in a field near Ashcombe. There I got petrol from a passing car, and at 6:10 I landed gently in my home meadow at Devizes, after a journey no person has ever taken and survived to describe. I have seen the beauty and the horror of the heights, and no greater beauty or horror is known to man. And now I plan to go once more before sharing my findings. My reason is I must have some proof before telling this tale. Others will soon follow and confirm, yet I wish to be convincing from the start. Those lovely iridescent bubbles should not be hard to catch. They drift slowly, and a swift monoplane could intercept them. They may dissolve in the heavier air, leaving only a small heap of jelly. Yet there would surely be something to support my story. Yes, I will go, even at risk. These purple horrors do not seem numerous. I may not see one. If I do, I will dive at once. At worst, there is always the shotgun and my knowledge of. Here a page is missing. On the next page is written in large, uneven writing, 43,000 feet. I shall never see Earth again. They are beneath me, 3 of them. God help me. It is a dreadful death to die. Such is the complete Joyce Armstrong statement. Nothing more has been seen of the man. Pieces of his broken monoplane were found in the estate of Mr. Bud Lushington on the Kent and Sussex border, near where the notebook was discovered. If his theory is correct that this air jungle existed only over southwest England, then he seems to have fled from it at top speed but was caught and devoured by these horrible creatures somewhere in the outer atmosphere, above where the grim remains were found. The image of that monoplane skimming down the sky, with nameless terrors flying swiftly beneath and cutting it off from Earth while closing in, is one upon which a sane man would not dwell. Many still mock these facts, but they must admit Joyce Armstrong has vanished, and I leave them his own words. This notebook may explain what I am trying to do, and how I lost my life in doing it, but no drivel about accidents or mysteries, if you please. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more.